to our program on LGBTQIA allyship through the Suffolk Public Library. I am Lisa Gooding, and I'm presenting with my partner at work, Eden Scott. Today we're going to talk about why allyship is important, what it means to be an ally when you are not a part of the community identified. We can use our power as outside influencers to help those with less power. In society, the rights of the LGBTQIA plus groups range from human rights, social justice, and equal protection. There may be abuses going on physically, emotionally, legally, and as an ally, we can be a part of advancing equality. Personally, we may have friends who fit under the umbrella of LGBTQIA+. We may have relatives or know members of the community within that umbrella. Whatever your relationship with the LGBTQIA+ community, you are welcome to be an ally. We're going to give a little bit of foundational information on the gay rights movement in the United States and the historical, psychological, and legal changes that have happened over the last 120, 200 years or so.
We'll also take some time to highlight some key terminology. I do want to acknowledge that by no means is the information that we're sharing today exhaustive. This is really just an opportunity to give you some knowledge to begin your allyship and a framework and a footwork to be able to take off from. We hope that you use the information that we share today as a launch pad, and that you take some time to dig in some of the resources that we share later and do some of your own educational research to continue to develop your knowledge and understanding.
In the history of how homosexuality was viewed in the American Psychological Association, I went back to Alfred Kinsey's sexual research that changed the rigid notions of homosexuality all the way back in 1948. There was a major setback in the government in December of 1950 when homosexuality was cited as a security risk by the Employment of Homosexuals and Other Sex Perverts in Government Act. By 1952, the APA listed homosexuality as a sociopathic personality disturbance. And also in 1952, Dwight Eisenhower banned homosexual people from working in the federal government or for its contractors. By 1956, Evelyn Hooker presented research stating that heterosexual males and homosexual males do not differ psychologically. She presented it to the APA, so the research was widely known. The board of the APA voted to remove homosexuality from its list of mental illnesses on December 15th of 1973. The first gay rights organization was founded in Chicago in 1924. By 1950, Harry Hay founded a sustained gay rights organization in Los Angeles. And then in 1955 in San Francisco, the Daughters of Bilitis became the first lesbian rights organization. The Stonewall riot happened in New York City on, in 1969. And then a year later, on June 28th, 1970, the Christopher Street Liberation Day parade commemorated the 1 year anniversary of the Stonewall riots. This is a precursor to our modern pride parades. The assassination of Harvey Milk in 1978 was a pivotal moment in gay rights leadership. Although the murder was not considered to be caused by homophobia, the murderer's sentence was only 7 years, and it sparked a protest in San Francisco City Hall. The Democrats became the first major political party to endorse a homosexual rights platform in 1980. In the 1980s and beyond, we saw the AIDS epidemic that was viewed at first as a gay men's disease. By the time it became widely known, hundreds of thousands of activists took part in the National March on Washington to demand that President Ronald Reagan address the AIDS crisis on October 11th, 1987. That is 6 years after the first AIDS case was known. There's a lot of legal and legislative information as it pertains to LGBTQIA plus rights. On January 13th, 1958, in the landmark case 1 Inc. v. Olson, the United States Supreme Court ruled in favor of the First Amendment rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender magazine 1, the homosexual magazine. The suit was filed under the US Postal Service, and FBI declared the magazine obscene material, and it marks the first time the United States Supreme Court ruled in favor of homosexuals. On January 1st, 1962, Illinois repealed its sodomy laws, becoming the first US state to decriminalize homosexuality. On March 2nd, 1982, 20 years later, Wisconsin becomes the first US state to outlaw discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. Don't ask, don't tell, banning asking about your sexual orientation or volunteering information about your sexual orientation, was issued by the Department of Defense on December 21st, 1993. The case of Romer v. Evans, the United States Supreme Court decided that the Colorado Second Amendment denying gays and lesbians protections against discrimination is unconstitutional, calling them special rights. That happened on May 20th of 1996. As the pace of legislation and legal cases speeds up, on September 21st, 1996, President Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act into law, defining marriage as only between a man and a woman. Vermont became the first state in the US to legalize civil unions and registered partnerships between same sex couples on April 26, 2000. On June 26, 2003, in Lawrence v. Texas, the US Supreme Court ruled that sodomy laws in the US are unconstitutional. Massachusetts became the first state to legalize gay marriage on May 18, 2004. The court found the prohibition of gay marriage unconstitutional because it denies dignity and equality of all individuals. November 4th, 2008, California voters approved Proposition 8, making same sex marriage in California illegal. And then on June 17th, 2009, President Obama signed a presidential memorandum allowing same sex partners of federal employees to receive certain benefits. The memorandum does not cover full health coverage. On October 28th, 2009, the Matthew Shepard Act was passed by Congress and signed into law by President Obama. Matthew Shepard was beaten and left for dead because of his sexuality. On August 4th, 2010, a federal judge in San Francisco decided that gays and lesbians have the constitutional right to marry and that Prop 8 is unconstitutional. December 18th, 2010, the US Senate votes 65-31 to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, allowing gays and lesbians to serve openly in the US military. February 23rd, 2011, President Obama states his administration will no longer defend the Defense Against Marriage Act, which bans the recognition of same sex marriage. June 24th, 2011, New York State passes the Marriage Equality Act, becoming the largest state thus far to legalize gay marriage. And then on June 26th, 2015, with a 5-4 decision in Obergefell v. Hodges, the U.S. Supreme Court declares same sex marriage legal in all 50 states.
So we're going to change topics towards terminology. We're going to start with sexual orientation. So sexual orientation is a component of identity that includes a person's sexual and emotional attraction to another person and the behavior that may result from this attraction. The term gay, related to or characterized by sexual or romantic attraction to someone of the same gender, often used for men only. So thinking about our homosexual men or our trans men that are attracted to other men. Lesbian, someone that identifies as female, that are sexually or romantically attracted to others that identify also as female. Bisexual or bi, somebody that's attracted sexually or romantically to people of more than one gender or sex, not necessarily at the same time, in the same way, or to the same degree. Seen as being more based on the gender binary, so male or female. Pansexual or pan is somebody that's attracted sexually or romantically to people from any gender identity, not necessarily at the same time, in the same way, or to the same degree, often phrased as hearts, not parts. Somebody who identifies as pansexual is not strictly identifying their partner based on the gender binary, meaning it's not their partners aren't just male, female. They can be male, female, trans, non-binary, agender, gender non-conforming, a full spectrum. Asexual or ace is a spectrum of identities related to no to low desire or need for sexual activity, low to no experiences of sexual attraction, or intermittent or conditional experiences of sexual attraction. So there's a whole bunch of different identities that fall under asexual. Then there's same gender loving, specifically used in the Black community to represent individuals that experience sexual or romantic attraction to someone of the same gender. It's important to note that a number of these terms are specifically related to American Western ideals and experiences within the LGBT community, and that different areas have different terminology for their sexual identities and their gender identities. So now we're going to switch to gender terms. So sex deals with the physical or physiological features, including chromosomes, gene expression, hormone levels and function, and reproductive sexual anatomy. There's variation in the biological attributes that comprise sex and how those attributes are expressed. So people that are intersexed may have different chromosomes, different reproductive or sexual anatomy. Some of the physiological expression might be different. People who present as male may have multiple X chromosomes. People who present as female may have Y chromosomes. as science continues to delve into the genes and different types of gene expression, we're learning more about the differences in sex as well. Sex is different than gender. So I'm going to talk a little bit about gender identity. Gender identity relates to how an individual perceives their place on the gender spectrum. It's their internal understanding of being male, female, some combination of the two, or neither. Um, then their gender expression is how that individual chooses to outwardly express their gender identity, the external expression of the internal identity. So they can choose typically masculine clothing, typically feminine clothing, some combination, or neither. Um, it's just how they take their identity and relate it to the outward world. Cisgender is when an individual's sex assigned at birth and gender identity and expression are congruent with another. And then transgender is an umbrella term that encompasses a spectrum of gender identities and expressions that are outside of being cisgender. So when a gender identity and expression do not align exclusively with the sex assigned at birth. And I did want to highlight non binary because I know that is a term that not many people are aware of or familiar with. So non binary or NB, often spelled out as ENBY, is someone that does not identify in the gender binary, meaning they do not identify with male or female in any capacity. So they don't prescribe to male, female, or any mixture of the two. This is a graphic that was designed initially by Landon Pan and Anna Moore, and then adapted later by Dr. Erica Jane Friedman to visualize the differences between sex, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. So as we can see in the top there, it goes over gender identity, and there's a couple different lines there where you can be on a spectrum within those lines. Same with gender expression, and it delineates gender assigned at birth or sex assigned at birth. Goes over the differentiation in genitals, different hormone levels, chromosomes, and then down on the bottom, separate from gender, it talks about the different sexual identities and different types of attraction. So you can be sexually attracted, physically attracted, emotionally attracted, mentally attracted to different types of people in different capacities. Um, I encourage you to spend some time with this graphic when you get an opportunity to really take an opportunity to visualize what these different identities mean and how they may present. So now we're going to talk a little bit about being an ally. So we're going to go over what it means to be an ally, the difference between an ally and then an advocate or activist, and then talk about some tips that you can use to continue to develop into being an ally for the LGBT plus community.
What does it mean being an ally? We're going to define ally broadly. The more we welcome to our party, the better it gets. Being an ally includes any person who is not part of a marginalized group, who stands up and advocates for the rights of the people in that group. I took a quote from Noah in the book The Savvy Ally. I am far more interested in the intentional allies, folks who work hard toward the goal of advocating frequently, but not every second of every day, than the perfect allies, folks who respond to every comment every time. I think living and acting intentionally is far more manageable and sustainable experience. Sustained 50% is better than a burst of 100% followed by burnout.
Um, I'd like to take a moment to add, I think that quote is fantastic. Um, I think it's also important to understand that there are different levels of being an ally too. There are the people who are the advocates and the activists who are out at the marches, who are at the front of the line speaking, who are visible. They're also the allies that are at the back, and they're feeding the people that are on the front lines. They're making sure that the people who are out front are eating and sleeping and being taken care of. Um, and that it's important to acknowledge that you can be an ally without necessarily having to be the person at the front, um, standing up front of everybody, talking at a city council meeting or a government meeting. Sometimes you get to be you can be an ally and be the person that is cooking a meal for everybody at the end of the day, bringing bottled water to the event, and making sure that the people up front are taken care of, so that they can continue to be out there. Um, and it's also taking care of the other people in your life who might be the people that are a part of the LGBT community that are experiencing some of the um, microaggressions, some of the hate that are being impacted by some of these decisions that are being made, and taking the time to be there for them, be a shoulder, listen, and then work within your small groups to combat some of the negativity.
There are many different ways to work in the advocacy and activism front as an ally. You can participate in pride events, and this is a celebration of people who are not always safe or comfortable being out and loud. Pride events are loud and they are crowded and they are raucous parties, but it is special that that is a safe place for the LGBTQIA plus community and their allies to celebrate. Talk with politicians, your voice, whether you use calls, letters, emails, or even social media contact, influences politicians because they are your representative in government. They need to hear your voice to be your voice. Join in rallies, marches, and protests. Being with like minded people is empowering and energizing. Together, we are stronger. Fundraising. Joining or leading movements to raise money for the LGBT plus support, healthcare, education, and engagement is powerful. Money pooled from many can help the larger community. Some of our allyship is just in the language we use every day. Tips from the book The Savvy Ally are to ungender your language. Don't make the words you use always fall along a gender binary. Make sure you mirror the language people use for themselves in their relationships. If someone refers to their partner or spouse and not husband or wife, make an effort to mirror that. If someone refers to themselves using pronoun he, she, or they, make an effort to reflect those pronouns. Use language that works for everyone. There are words that work for male, female, non binary, uh, gender non conforming, and gender fluid people. Aim to use those words and be intentional about using the correct name and pronoun for people. Once you know it, try and use it. Allow yourself to make mistakes because sometimes you'll revert to the gender binary that you've been using and get it right next time. Another tip is to make your allyship visible. Wear buttons, t shirts, and accessories that show you're a safe ally. Use signs, posters, and bumper stickers to let vulnerable people know you are in their corner. If you feel safe, speak out. If you don't feel safe, then it's not safe for anyone. Beyond how we express our allyship, we need to learn about our community, find organizations that you can be involved in, contribute to political and nonprofit advocacy. Listen, listen, listen. If you don't know where you belong in the community, ask, then listen more.
We're going to close out today talking a little bit about ally action planning. So, taking some of the information that we provided and using it to move forward and begin or continue if you are already if you already are an ally, your work into becoming a better ally. Attached to the post, you'll find an ally action plan worksheet. It's a 2-page document that you can use to outline areas that you would like to work on and then your steps that you can take. So the top half of this first sheet covers, gives you space to write down 3 to 5 areas that you would like to work on to be a better ally. Then you can use the grid below that and the individual action steps to write out what area you're working on and what specific action you want to work on or take. And then what resources you need, what support you need, and then a space for you to write down any hurdles that you may face that you can start to anticipate and when you would hope to complete the step by. The second page of this document is more spaces for the individual action steps. So some tips for action planning. It's important to be specific on the areas that you would like to focus on. For example, using more inclusive language, so ungendering your language. Um, some steps that you can use, you can consider for that one. So breaking it down into those smaller actionable pieces would be to determine what gendered language you do use in your everyday vernacular. Another step could be learning alternatives for the gendered language that you use. You're going to want to make sure that you determine what you need to support each action step. So, utilizing online resources to learn about gendered language and alternatives, asking friends to help hold you accountable or for using correct language. Acknowledge the things that might make completing this task difficult. So use this to help identify other support that you might need or help you avoid the pitfalls before they happen. And so, for example, other people will not understand the language I'm using, or I will slip back into using gendered language. So you can use that to help anticipate some of the areas that you might get stuck. So that way you can either seek out additional support that you might need or intentionally try to set yourself up for success. And then set a timeline. While a number of these items you may work on will require ongoing efforts, ongoing learning, and continued use, you can still set a goal for when you want to be actively engaging in that behavior. So, in the example of the inclusive language, in 3 weeks, I want to alter my language use and can consciously remove gender from my speech. So, you may still slip up, and that's okay. It's just important to make sure that you set a goal so that way you can hold yourself accountable to actually taking those individual steps along the way. And if you do slip up, forgive yourself, acknowledge, and do better. Just keep trying and keep trying. That's all you can do. Mistakes will happen, and that's okay. So some resources, specifically in Hampton Roads, there is the Suffolk LGBT Center of Hampton Roads. You can find them on Facebook by searching Suffolk LGBT. There's the LGBT Life Center, which is located in Norfolk, and their website is lgbtlifecenter.org. There's the Newport News Human Rights Commission, which you can get to through the hrcapinc.org and searching for the Newport News Human Rights Commission. There's Outkind Counseling, which specializes in LGBTQ counseling. Outwork 757, which specializes in supporting out individuals navigating finding work in Hampton Roads. There's Hampton Roads PFLAG, which is Parents and Families of Lesbians and Gays. It's a national organization, but this is for the local chapter. So you can find their meeting information there at pflaghr.com. There's Serenity Counseling Center, which you can find at seekyourserenity.com. They also specialize in LGBTQ counseling. And then there's Hampton Roads Pride, which you can find at hamptonroadspride.org. Some national resources, and there's the Trevor Project, which has a ton of resources around specifically combating suicidality within the LGBT community. But they have also expanded the amount of information that they have to include some more information about kind of this LGBTQ Ally 101. So learning language, terminology, history, some of the current issues that surround the queer community, both politically as well as socially. There's also Trans Lifeline, which you can get to at translifeline.org, which focuses in on the trans community. There's the GLAD Network, which has tons of educational resources as well as community actionable resources. Um, they also have a whole bunch of information about LGBTQ people in media, and they do a lot of information gathering. Um, there's also the National LGBTQ Task Force. You can find them at thetaskforce.org. They focus more specifically into the political realm and advancing equality for the LGBTQ community. And then there's GLSEN, which you can find at glisten.org. They focus more so on youth, LGBT youth. You can find tons of other national resources by going to glad.org/resource list. They break it down into different topic areas and have links to tons of national organizations. Most of those organizations may also have local chapters or local affiliates that you can connect with too. So some of the sources that we use for today, we have the graphic that was adapted by Dr. Erica Jane Friedman from Florida International University. We've pulled information from the National LGBT Health Education Center, Trans Student Educational Resources, Milestones in the American Gay Rights Movement, and the Savvy Ally, a guide for becoming a skilled LGBTQ plus advocate. If you'd like to read the Savvy Ally, we do have copies available at Suffolk Public Library for you to check out or put on hold. We would like to thank you all for joining us today. And I'd like to make sure that I thank Elisa for all of her work in pulling information together for this. And we hope that this has given you a good foundation to get started on your journey to be an ally or to continue in your development and growth as an ally. Um, if you have any questions or anything, please check out our calendar. We will have some more events coming up for Pride Month. So feel free to join us. Come ask your questions, engage in community, and we hope to see you at more of our events.
Thank you, Aiden. And I want to remind anyone who's viewing this before the first Saturday in June that there will be free HIV and STD testing sponsored by the LGBT Center at Por Favor Coffee in Suffolk. And Aiden and I will be there.
Well, thank you all, and we hope that this has been informative.